welcome to How to Train Your Dragon 3 or How to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World. I'm here together with Sambers and with Jill, and Jill made some notes.
Yeah, I made some notes about what I think about the movie, and I was like, okay, well, we don't want to have an empty paper here, so I drew Toothless, but then I made it upside down by purpose or by accident, so this is Toothless upside down, and these are my notes correctly, and we're going to go through them, and we're going to try to make a review, maybe with some minor spoilers, but we'll try to keep them low.
Yeah, indeed. First of all, the good things about the movie. I was really impressed with the new graphics of the movie in general. It started out very nice with a mist-filled shipyard where you could see the reflection of the light, and the parts of the hidden world, the colors really come to life. You can see the love they put into that movie. It really went ahead when it comes down to the graphical fidelity of it all. Also, the storyline, even though that it is a continuation of part 1 and part 2, if you haven't seen the first 2 movies, it still watches very good. It's not, you won't get some of the references in there because they reference part 1 and 2 quite frequently, but you can still enjoy it as a standalone movie. It is a solid story. The rehashing of part 1 and 2 does not feel forced. It's the story itself, especially in the beginning of the movie, it flows relatively nicely.
Yeah, and there are references to the first part, and if you know them, then they're good and they're funny. I'm not going to tell you, of course, but the references to the first and second movie are there, and it's a continuation of the story, and it's really getting to an end of the Toothless and Hiccup story together. I believe when they finished the second film, they were thinking about making 2 other films, but they skipped that plan, and now they made a part 3, which should be the end of this trilogy.
Yeah. What I liked about that they went more in depth with the whole storyline. You got some more information about certain characters or certain events, and that's what I liked a lot about part 3.
Yep.
Another point that I did like is that, well, in part 2, the main bad guy was, well, like the typical bad guy, and that's it. And the bad guy introduced in this movie was the bad guy that was a hero in his own tale. You could very physically see that he was trying to make the world a better place. Of course, not in the most subtle of ways, but his motivation was, in his own eyes, he was the hero of the story, so to speak. And that gives him a proper motivation, and that kind of really, I like that.
Yeah,
you could see...
His motivation was trying to be the best. The bad guy from the second film had like a history about dragons killing his family. But in the third film, this bad guy is really like, I just want to be the best at being what I do, and that is hunting dragons.
And for him, it was something that he wanted to finish as well.
Yeah. So one more left.
Yeah, he wanted to just close off the story for himself, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was a bit more than dragons killed my family, rah rah rah, look at me killing everything else.
Yeah, there's more to it.
And there was more to it. That's what I did like.
Mm-hmm.
However, the movie is certainly not without its flaws. The biggest flaw that I saw was that what Jill mentioned earlier is that it felt like they had 2 movies and they squeezed it into one, because the storyline, it flows very nicely through the first acts, but at the last one, especially compared to the epic end battle of part 2, it just felt like it was a bit underwhelming, so to speak. I'm not going to go into details here, you have to see that for yourself. But it really felt like, okay guys, we have this wonderful idea. Oh, we only have so many minutes left. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, they were going towards the end a bit too quick for my liking as well. And that's a shame, because I feel that they could have done way more with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot with a lot of movies. A lot of people are saying like, it's getting squeezed too much into a movie. And you also read stories about directors and their artistic team having struggles with the directors of the company, that always the company seems like the bad guy, restricting their reins, like, sorry, you can just make one movie and you have to cut those scenes. And it felt like it happened here too, because the director is really passionate about this movie, and you feel that he could have done way more, that he wanted more as well. You can feel it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a shame that he would be getting, or that he is getting restricted in his creative freedom, so to speak. Because I feel like with the whole lore behind the dragons as well, there were a few new species of dragons introduced as well. And that's what I personally really like about the whole How to Train Your Dragon series, is that there was so much more background lore. I loved the art books and everything, and the series on Netflix as well, where you get to see more of the dragons. And I love that kind of creative freedom that they got to do with the whole world of How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, but there was of course a very important new dragon, which was Light Fury.
Oh yes.
And I liked her.
Yeah, I loved her as well. She was so beautiful. Like felt very elegant to me. Like the shimmer on her scales, her shapes were way more feminine, and I don't know, it was a nice counterpart to Toothless.
Yeah, and she stayed wild. She was very wild, and she was very shy to get close to the people, and it took a very long time for actually doing that. Also getting to Toothless, and the interaction between them is very nice, because you can actually feel like, okay, Toothless is a domestic dragon, she's a wild dragon, so they're clashing, like, how do we meet? And that's
you
so
can
cute.
vary the motivation behind the behavior of the two characters is very well done, because Light Fury, how she is being introduced, and of course Toothless, who we know by 3 movies now, their history is very much resulting into an interaction that shows off, well, as you can see in the trailers, Toothless does not really know what to do, because he has been with humans all the time.
Yeah.
And I really liked how that worked out, because it shows like I am not experienced with this. And throughout the movie you see that both characters actually learn from each other and they evolve. And in the end of the movie they truly have learned something from the last installment. And I really liked how that turned out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Light Fury was a good choice. And design good, character good, good addition to the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
One other thing that we commented on was the dragon scale armor that the characters were wearing.
Yeah.
I really liked it because they were explaining why they were using dragon scale armor at some point, and the design of the armors itself was, in my opinion, very beautiful, because you could see the design of the dragon that they used back in the armor. It kind of reminds me of a game that I play a lot called Monster Hunter, and where you also use parts of the monsters that you hunt to make your own armor. And I really liked that. It was really nice from a design perspective.
Yeah, plus this is also one thing. In the beginning you would say from, hey, dragon scales, dragon armor, but they like the dragons, and it is being hinted at various times in the movie that the dragons shed quite a bit. So they actually make those dragon armor from the scales that are being shed off. So it's not like the dragons are being harmed.
Yeah, and then there's the sheep.
Oh yes, the sheep. If you have seen part 1 and 2, you know that the sheep are a recurring gag. And in part 3, I really liked the little twist that they took along with them.
Yeah, that's also a good thing about part 3, is that it still has funny scenes, like the sheep, but also all the characters that you already know from the other movies, like the twins or Eret, they all have a little story or something going on in this movie, as have the sheep, and or Gobbler, and everyone has their little thing, and it's good, it's bad, it's about growing up, it's about anything.
A bit of comic relief as well in some cases.
But in terms of the comic reliefs, the scenes don't feel forced.
No.
It has a natural flow to it.
It does, yes.
We did have that little part in the beginning that the flow in the end kind of abruptly ends, but through the first act and especially between the comic-con scenes and the more serious scenes, that flow is there. It's actually pretty nicely done.
Yeah. And we were also commenting on the hidden world.
Yeah, you see it in the trailers, you see a couple of hints from it in the hidden world, truly beautifully done. And I think that they had a lot more ideas with it, but in the end it turned out to be a little bit of a footnote. In the movie, the hidden world is a smaller section of it that you might have expected.
Yeah. The design of it was beautiful though, like it's I might be getting a bit spoilerish here, but it's very much an underwater world, so to speak. So you see a lot of coral, you see a lot of fluorescent light and everything.
You can see it in the trailers.
Yeah, you can see it in the trailers as well, that's true. But
it reminded me of a couple of scenes from both Finding Nemo and from Avatar. The fluorescent scenes from that, and that is definitely not a bad thing. It's very nicely done.
Yeah, but I feel they could have expanded on the hidden world. It felt like too much of a small part now, so to speak. For the movie being called The Hidden World, in my opinion, they should have done more with it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I also like is Hiccup and Astrid's relationship. One thing I love the most about part 2 is, okay, they're a couple. And when you have a couple beginning in part 1, and part 2 always goes about how the relationship is having a struggle. Like, oh no, we have on different things, blah blah blah. With them, it's totally fine. In part 2, it's already like, oh, everything is okay, it's totally fine, we're happy, and that's it.
Yeah.
While most movies go into troubles. And that continues in this movie as well. They're not thinking about, where can we make more drama? Oh, let's put something in between them. I love that. That's less drama.
They have their disagreements because, of course, in the movie, serious choices have to be made. But it feels natural. It's not forced. And that is one thing that I really love about this movie. It does not have the typical liar revealed scene in it. That there is something that is misunderstood and that's why blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
You've seen those scenes in typical movies and everything. This movie has not one of those scenes, and the absence of it, I love it. I really do.
I did expect one.
Yeah.
I was waiting for it, but it didn't.
It didn't happen, and I'm happy with this. I am really.
And Astrid is now a really good girlfriend.
Yeah, she was really supportive of Hiccup and trying to actually help him overcome the problems that he had in the movie.
Yeah, the dynamic within the relationship, they're both equals to each other. They both listen to each other, and they're not always right.
Even though Astrid obviously has the pants on.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's fine. No, it's really good.
Yeah. Tabo, you were commenting about the animation layer effects as well?
Oh yes, with animation you have a so-called layer effect where you render one bit of the animation and then the other bit later on. Especially in the scenes where the light fury flies through the sky. You can see that the lighting is a little bit different and it feels a little bit unnatural. However, you must be an animation not to spot that one. Otherwise than that, I was rather impressed with it. It's not the best animation ever, but it's certainly very good. I enjoyed it, especially the parts with the hidden world and with the part where they had the flybys of Burke in its various forms. And especially the scenes with the mist. I enjoyed that. It was really a feast for the eyes.
Yeah, I personally really liked how they rendered the clouds. Like, they made it look very natural how the clouds were moving when the dragons flew through them. Mm-hmm. And there was also a scene where there was water being pushed up like as a sort of spout up, sort of, so to speak, or something falling in the water. I don't remember exactly, but that looked really good. Like that must have been very difficult to animate, I imagine. So
yeah, what I see with that water, the various so-called fluidic and particle effects, most likely they hired a new guy for it who was like, okay, I need to prove myself, because you see a lot of sand being thrown around, you see a lot of water being thrown around,
as well.
and all that's like particle effects, and especially at one point in one of the buildings, somebody is walking over the roof and you see the sand falling down. The scenes where Light Fury and Night Fury interact, you see the sand going down, they playing in the sand. It's really like, hey, we found this neat little trick, let's show it. But it wasn't overly showy. It felt natural in it, but if you look into the animation, it really stands out.
I think one of the last points that we have was why can't Burke go to the hidden world, but I feel like that may be a bit spoilerish.
Yeah, we're not going into details for that. We'll leave you for seeing that. That's it kind of shows with how much the hidden world is there. It is truly a voyage that they undertake towards that. Whatever happens in the end, you'll have to see that for yourself. But that leads us to one of the final points. They said this was the last movie, but it does not feel like the ending of a trilogy. It feels like they really wanted to make another movie behind it. They leave a lot of untied knots in the storylines.
Well, who knows, maybe we will be pleasantly surprised in the future and there will be a part 4. That would be awesome.
I certainly would go see it.
So, what did you guys think? Which one of the 3 movies was, in your opinion, the best?
I still think part 2 is better because it was way more surprising and there was a lot of evolving in the characters compared to part 1. The third film now was really going on part 2 and the strength of part 2, but part 2 was really surprising, and we were saying that the animation was really good, but I did feel like in part 3 they didn't make all the use of it. They did make some pretty scenes, but not as astounding and surprising, also combining it with music as in part 2. I really felt like I was hoping that part 3 would be as surprising as part 2, but that didn't happen for me.
Maybe we've been spoiled a little bit as well. I mean, the techniques nowadays are getting better and better.
But like I said, with like, for example, the music as well, and making a scenery pretty, there's an unbelievably pretty song at the end, but I had the feeling they had to use it a minute before it already to make me cry. I did cry in this movie, by the way.
I tears in my eyes as well.
I did. So that's a good ending. That's a good movie ending. But I had the feeling like you could have done it earlier or more often in the movie. You could have used those animation magic way more like you did in part 2, where you're astounded by what they can achieve.
One of the reasons why we did expect it to be blown away a little bit more in part 3 than part 2 is that besides the trailer they made a couple of shorts, like where they were trying to record with Toothless in the studio and Toothless on Times Square. I really had the idea from, okay, they're going full out with this one, and so it's not a bad movie, absolutely not, but they made it look like we're really going for this one.
And we didn't feel like it came, for me, it didn't come up as surprising or extraordinary as part 2.
But still a very good movie. I enjoyed it, absolutely. And if there is ever going to be a part 4, I definitely going to see it.
Definitely.
If you like part 1 and 2, I certainly would recommend going there.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah.
So too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, any other points that we have?
Did we discuss the choices already between the 3 characters?
No.
We did actually talk about Hiccup a lot.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about anything about Hiccup.
But not the other characters that had to make choices. And Toothless had to make a choice, which he was obviously very conflicted about.
And Hiccup as well.
Yeah.
Both.
But that's one thing that you see in the end, that the characters make their decisions based on the things they've learned during their adventure. Although, especially in the very end, what you can see is that those choices are being suggested that there's going to be a next movie, especially on the last final scenes. But we're not going to the details for that because spoiler city.
You're just gonna have to watch the movie.
Yeah. So if you like,
spend that money.
yeah.
No, it's definitely worth going to see the movie, if only to get a better idea of the whole world of How to Train Your Dragon and Berk and everything. Mm-hmm. There's more depth in there. So if you want to find out more about their world, I would say definitely go see this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. As for the last part, if you go there, between the 2D and the 3D version of the movie, I really haven't seen that much different for it. I got the impression that it has been added in post-production, so it's not really like you must see this movie in 3D. Big screen is always handy, of course, but yeah, it's both enjoyable in 2D and 3D. I think. What do you think?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some scenes where I did notice the 3D aspects, but there was nothing mind-blowing in that sense.
Yeah, like I said, the mind-blowing stuff for me was more in part 2 than in part 3, also with the 3D.
Indeed. So, I would like to thank you, both you, Jill, and Sambers, for calling in, of course.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Yes.
And I'd say if you're going to see the movie, do enjoy it, and we certainly did. Have a good one, and see you next time. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye bye. Stay awesome.